speaking to people. I think this is a very important element and should not be underestimated, even though we are living in a time of electronic communication where we can basically exchange messages over the phone. I think the personal element is extremely important. I think that's something that can be probably, there's probably room for improvement on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, let's hear Marko Savkovic. He's from a think tank and is an astute observer of the region and Europe in general. So I'd really like to see some of your comments on some of these issues, and then we'll come back for a second short round.
Thank you. Very happy to be here with you today, listening to 4 ambassadors. I mean, I couldn't imagine a more difficult task at hand than summing up of what they have said and also commenting. But I would say that we haven't really talked about what happened yesterday in Kosovo. I think that's also another important issue, something that is on many minds today. And since we seem to be heading towards change of government, and we still need to see just how this new government will adjust to the reality of the ongoing dialogue, which, as you have said in your brief that you have sent us, it has more or less ceased and has been this way for the past 3 years or so. This is the question that I think is on the mind of many, but also speaking of EU's credibility, there is a lot of criticism addressed at Brussels, but I think it's worth mentioning that big part, or significant part of that credibility has been saved with the latest progress report that was highly critical of some of the developments in Serbia and in the other countries of the Western Balkans. And it has been, I would say, highly appreciated by those in the think tank community who have warned of these transgressions when it comes to rule of law and the fundamental principles that were supposed to guide us towards European integration. Other than that, we have seen over the past, especially when you compare the situation maybe some 10 or 15 years ago, we have seen kind of uncertainty, I think. Uncertainty is the word that describes the state of relations in the Western Balkans, lack of trust, and there was this belief that European integration is the way that it should prepare us for, regional cooperation is the way which should prepare us for eventual European integration, make us all more European, more ready for accession. But over the time, we've seen that there is uncertainty with regard to regional cooperation as well. There are many initiatives. We all know the story. And there's also criticism directed towards the Berlin process. I simply have to comment, until there is first section of a highway built with money that came through Berlin process agreement, this is the kind of criticism that you will expect. Simply, when we look at what other countries have been doing, some of the countries that you have mentioned as this rival powers or outside powers, they see where our needs are, and they are short-term to mid-term willing to meet those needs and to fill in that gap. The biggest fear, on the other hand, I think, is the possibility of us becoming, Serbia in particular, becoming a proxy for some future confrontation. I think this hasn't been mentioned. It's not only an issue of geopolitics, it's an issue of not only Chapter 35, but also issues that we have with alignment in the Chapter 31 of the negotiating process. That has become, I would say, no less of a challenge than other chapters 23 and 24. And as for the accession process, as a negotiating process, it has become highly complex. It was always political, but now it seems to be taken more firmly in the hands of member states, which is another challenge, because leaderships of member states are, of course, wary of lack of support among populations, their populations towards European, towards continuing enlargement. And the enlargement still is, next to common market, the most successful policy that the EU has devised. And when we start talking about EU, here we talk about the peace project, right? So that's another issue, which worries us all, I would say. I would stop here.
Well, thank you for those comments. Now, I think Marko hit on a few issues, but before we go on, and again, I will try to ask you to really identify what you think the major problem is for the region, for whatever country you want to talk about, how you see this. I'll tell you a little secret. You know, the brief I made that sounds pessimistic to you, a lot of it was taken out of Pierre Mirel's latest piece, if you've seen it only 2 weeks ago, and you know Pierre Mirel is very well. And for the benefit of the audience, he was the director in the Directorate of the European Union for 10 years, okay, dealing with this issue. So if you read Pierre Mirel and what he has to say about the Berlin process, what he has to say about how the EU should move forward, what the challenges are, what are not being faced, whatever I put in that brief is really very mild compared to what is in that paper, okay? So I would like to go back to that, you know. And the first question I kind of raised is, okay, so how do you deal with backsliding? I really understand, I think, what Macron was saying. The way I understood it was, look, Europe is an idea. It's not a geography. It's an idea. And the idea is we believe in this and this and this and this, starting with the rights of man in the French Revolution. And along the way, we've gone through an accession process, and Eastern Europeans have come in, but they're not really part of Europe as an idea. They're part now of our club, but actually they're not living up to the idea of Europe in a lot of ways. And these are already members of the European Union. So why should we, instead of dealing with this, deal with the Western Balkans that are maybe in the minds of people and our constituencies and people who vote for us even worse than the ones that we're in, okay? So I'm interpreting this, I'm making this on purpose and making this a little provocative, and of course I don't want to put these, I'm not putting words in Mr. Macron's mouth, I wouldn't dare do that. All I'm saying is perhaps this could be understood, it's understandable for people in Western Europe somewhere to say, look, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe like the professor from Greece said in the last panel, there's revision on Eastern Europe in the minds of people. Maybe they can't really live up to it. Now, if they can't live up to it, and there's all this backsliding, what do we do now to get things on the right path? And what's the guarantee that tomorrow, if we take all these Western Balkan countries in, we're not going to see much of the same thing? And then finally, I have to comment on this because I found it to be pretty funny last week when the Hungarian Minister of Justice was nominated by the Commission to be in charge of expansion. Everybody here was a little, at least official in the media, was upbeat about this, but I thought it was a joke. I thought this was going to fail, like it did. Okay, so if you have all these things that you think Orban is not doing right, to say the least, what does nominating such a man tell the rest of the Western Balkans? And he fails in the European Parliament, whatever happened to him. So let's talk about this a little bit on one of these topics that you might. And then I'll start this time from the Austrian ambassador first, then we can go down this way.
Look, we are in Austria. We have always supported the big Eastern enlargement. We were on the sort of on the front line, and up to now we have the latest polls tell us that over 55% of Austrians think it was a very successful enlargement. And I think so. Our perspective of enlargement is a very positive one because we are also very close to the region. We are part of Central Europe, and we have also benefited enormously economically. But we also have a lot of people coming to Austria. So I think the second thing is when you talk about backsliding and living up to the EU standards, I think we have to keep in mind the European Union is a community of laws. So, and we have a very clear legal setup how to deal with problems of that kind, and this is being used now. And I think this is where it also needs to be. We have to be careful, and I think you're addressing a right problem, is how the discussion, the political discourse within the European Union is being conducted. And I think all too easily you will have received the impression or gotten the perception that there is the West talking down to the East or the North talking down to the South, and I think that is something which is a problem and that needs to be addressed. But this is something where I agree we need to be more careful how we talk to each other. But so and that this has sort of leaves impressions here, I can fully understand. But the backsliding within the European Union, as you defined it, is something that needs to be dealt with the legal structures of the European Union.
Can that work? I mean, if it has to be unanimous, I mean, how
it's
are things?
It's the first time, so we need to see.
I'm sorry?
It's the first time, I think, so we need to see.
Good. Ambassador Schieb.
Thank you. Difficult questions indeed, and I mean, I don't want to pretend that all is fine, but and also on the risk to sound, maybe seeming to bit, what I will say now seems to be a bit banal, but I think, well, the European Union has always, in a way, it's always, you can say, a struggle. It's a community of 28 member states. It has never been easy, I think one can say, and I think in the last panel, the financial crisis was mentioned, migration. This is still very much on the agenda, no doubt. But yeah, it's always and will remain a work in progress. And yes, you can say, well, these commissioners, and now two have not been accepted, and I think another one is still suspended. But you can say, well, yeah, there are kind of procedures and regulations and checks and balances, and they seem to work. Sometimes it might be a bit painful, but they seem to work. And I mean, sometimes I think it, from the Belgrade perspective, sometimes I think it might be better to maybe concentrate more on the reforms which need to be implemented in this country than to discuss endlessly the state, the seemingly bad state the European Union is in. Yes, there are challenges, no doubt, but I think, and let's see what Sam Fabrizi will say, but I think the EU, up to now at least, has always seemed to be up to the task. So without trying to push problems under the carpet, this wouldn't make any sense and would be bad for our own credibility. But the fact that there is struggle, that there are controversial discussions, that we do have, sometimes things are not as fast as we would wish them to be or to be sorted out, this should not kind of lead to overall frustration and saying, well, see, it's accession talks, why have it? Not always to question this whole process fundamentally. I think this is because this is somehow detrimental to the motivation which is needed for this difficult and long path towards EU membership. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I don't think there are any Eurosceptics here, any of us, so we're not really doing any damage in the audience. But yeah, I understand. Look, I was in politics, I was in diplomacy. I'm not just a professor. I know how things work. I mean, in the sense that when they don't work and why they don't work. So I know there are big challenges, and I'm not saying any of this is easy. I'm just trying to raise some fundamental questions which are of interest, generally speaking, to people that want to really think this out and are really committed to this idea that somehow all this has to come together. Ambassador Fabrizi.
Thank you. I think it's a fascinating conversation. The EU is always called, and on one side or the other one, We were even accused of stabilocracy. You remember, was another buzzword a couple of years ago. But in reality, we take the democratic fabric, if I want to say so, seriously inside and outside the EU. And I think we are certainly not basically hiding that some issues on the rule of law is happening within the European Union. We have the mechanism, we have the willingness. I think the European election in May gave a real pushback, I would say. I mean, there was a gloomy sense. Nationalists, populists will take over the parliament, and the EU will be done. I think it's been a very remarkable exercise of people. A lot of young people went on the poll, giving the key of the EU to those who believe in the rule of law, given in the European Union. So when we come to the Western Balkans, it's clearly that we don't put in any sequence stability versus democracy. And if the European Commission paper can be a sort of reading in filigrane of what is, you see that it's 40 pages on rule of law. Someone said that we even too much. No, it's not. I mean, for us is a fundamental element to be tackled with. And of course, we are here to help making reform that I said before need to be owned. Shouldn't be the sort of a totem, a European totem. So we are not here to working for a cosmetic reform. We truly believe in a system of check and balances. The check and balances are very important because when you're in trouble, if you have independent judges, you have independent media, you have a working parliament, the check and balances work at that moment. So check and balance are very much important, especially in the moment of difficulties. And certainly we are encouraging as much as we can all the players within Serbia in all the region to work on this check and balance. They need to be not only up to our standard, but should be embedded in the system to be sustainable. Otherwise, in X number of years, somebody who might have a nice idea to say, you know what, I don't believe in check and balances. I believe in a different system, and I start to dismantle the system. This is something we don't want to be seen. And when we see, we are quite quick. I think our Finnish colleague told, but before, right now in the MFF conversation, link the regional fund to some. So there's a number of ideas that's going on. If I may just make a couple of comments that were said before with the visibility, something that of the EU, something is part of my daily job. I think that